was finishing up patient discharge paperwork when my phone buzzed on the desk. It wasn't my usual break time notification, just a persistent vibration that cut through the quiet hum of the hospital's evening shift like a scalpel. For a moment, I couldn't place why my stomach clenched. My shoulders ached from the 12-hour shift, and my mind felt foggy from the kind of exhaustion that came not from physical work, but from months of wedding planning, budget calculations, and coordinating every detail perfectly. Then I remembered. 3 days until my wedding. My heart lifted despite my tiredness. I reached for the phone expecting a sweet text from Connor, maybe something about our final venue walkthrough tomorrow. Something that would make me smile and remember why I'd fallen for the quiet bank teller who brought me coffee during my lunch breaks. But the name on the screen made my stomach drop. Vivian Blake, his mother. I frowned. Vivian had never contacted me directly, not unless she wanted something adjusted, something more suitable, for the Blake family reputation. My finger hesitated over the screen. Then curiosity won and I opened the message. We've changed the venue reservation. Connor knows what's right for the family. Don't create drama. Just accept this. I stared at the words. No, I must have misread. I read it again. The world shifted beneath me. My chest tightened. The letters seemed to blur and dance, mocking everything I'd planned. Our wedding was in 3 days. The Heritage Garden, where my parents had been married 30 years ago. The same gazebo, the same oak trees. The venue I'd booked 18 months in advance. Connor had held my hand there last week, promising, it'll be perfect, just like your parents' day. And now, what? This had to be a mistake. I shot up from my chair so quickly it rolled backward and hit the file cabinet. My hands shook as I dialed Connor's number. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. I called Piper, but there was no answer. I dialed the Heritage Garden directly. A woman answered after 4 rings, her tone apologetic and strained. Hi, this is Madison Stone, the bride for Saturday's ceremony. I received a confusing message about the venue being changed. A long pause, then a heavy sigh. Oh honey, I'm so sorry. Mr. Blake called this afternoon and said the family needed to relocate the event. We tried calling you for confirmation, but I stopped listening. The phone slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the desk. I stumbled to my locker in the staff room. My emergency wedding items were gone. The backup shoes I'd stored there, the ones that matched my grandmother's pearl necklace. The pressed flower from my parents' wedding bouquet that I'd planned to carry. All gone. I checked the small storage box where I kept my wedding planning binder. Empty. My eyes stung and my throat felt raw, but more than sadness, I felt fury. They had orchestrated this. They'd waited until I was trapped at work, knowing I couldn't react immediately. They thought I'd be too shocked, too devastated, too polite to fight back. They thought they'd crushed me. I grabbed my scrubs jacket and car keys. No time to change, no time for anything but action. I left the hospital without clocking out. I drove with white knuckles gripping the steering wheel, my foot heavy on the accelerator. My destination was clear. Not Connor's apartment. If he'd betrayed me like this, I didn't want to see his face. I needed to confront her. Vivian Blake lived in the largest house on Maple Ridge, a pristine colonial with manicured gardens and a circular driveway that screamed old money and older grudges. The kind of house that appeared in the local newspaper's society pages every Christmas. The front gate wasn't even closed. I parked crookedly and marched up the brick walkway. She opened the door before I could ring the bell, like she'd been watching from the window. Her face showed no surprise, no guilt. Just a patient, condescending smile like I was a confused child who had wandered to the wrong house. You need to compose yourself, she said calmly. I was standing on her doorstep in hospital scrubs after a 12-hour shift, and this woman who just destroyed my wedding was lecturing me about composure. Where's our venue reservation? I asked, my voice deadly quiet. Vivian adjusted her pearl necklace. Changed. And you won't need it anyway. The wedding is postponed indefinitely. You don't have the authority to postpone my wedding. Connor made the decision. He's doing what's best for everyone. I stared into her cold blue eyes, challenging her to look away first. She didn't flinch. Where is Connor? I demanded. He is busy. I wanted to scream, wanted to shake her until that smug expression cracked. Instead, I turned and walked away. But I wasn't finished. I didn't go home. I didn't break down. I didn't call my sister Carmen for support. I drove straight to Heritage Garden. I wasn't sure what I expected to find. Maybe an empty pavilion, chairs stacked away, decorations removed. Maybe a sign confirming the cancellation. Instead, I saw cars filling the parking lot. Guests in their Saturday best, carrying wrapped gifts and bouquets. Smiling faces I recognized from town. The venue was decorated exactly as I'd planned. White roses and baby's breath, string lights wound through the gazebo, cream-colored ribbons tied to every chair. Every detail I'd agonized over for months. All of it still there. My legs carried me forward without conscious thought. I walked toward the garden entrance. People waved and called out greetings. Mrs. Peterson from the pharmacy said, "You look wonderful, dear," like nothing was wrong. I stepped through the archway and my heart stopped. There was Piper in a wedding dress. Standing beside Connor under the gazebo where my parents had promised to love each other forever. Everything went silent. My mind refused to process the image. Piper, my sorority sister, the woman who'd helped me choose that exact dress, who'd cried happy tears when I'd shown her the photos from my final fitting. She was glowing, radiant, the perfect bride. The bride I was supposed to be. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then understanding hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't a last-minute change of heart. This had been planned for weeks, maybe months. Connor had let me book the venue, choose the flowers, address invitations, all while knowing he intended to replace me. I was never the bride. I was the placeholder. The rehearsal for the real event. They'd planned to let me discover this from a distance, through social media posts or town gossip. No confrontation, no explanation. Just erasure. They thought I'd disappear quietly. They thought they could delete me from my own story. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I took one step forward, then another. I continued walking down the aisle toward the gazebo. Piper's eyes found mine. Her face transformed from joy to horror to panic in seconds. Connor turned to see what had captured her attention. The color drained from his face. Vivian was already moving, rushing toward me like she could physically block my approach. She reached out her hand. "You need to leave immediately," she hissed under her breath. I looked at her and smiled. "I'll stay." Gasps echoed through the garden. More whispers, louder now. Guests were turning in their seats, phones coming out, recognition dawning. I met Vivian's gaze and saw something I'd never seen before. It was fear. She realized she'd miscalculated. All of them had. They were about to learn that erasing Madison Stone wasn't as simple as changing a venue reservation. Because this wasn't just a stolen wedding. This was the beginning of their reckoning. The moment I said, "I'll stay," everything around me shattered. Not physically, but the air itself seemed to crack. I could feel the shock ripple through the garden like waves. Vivian's eyes darted between the guests, the gazebo, and back to me. She was calculating, always calculating. She'd spent decades controlling this town's narratives, manipulating situations, turning every story into one where she emerged as either the victim or the hero. But she hadn't planned for this chapter. I watched her composed mask begin to slip. "I don't know what you think you're doing, Madison," she said through gritted teeth, her voice dripping with false sweetness and real threat. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing," I replied, my voice steady as steel. "You see, Vivian, I'm not here to make a scene. I'm here to witness, to observe, to give you exactly the moment you prayed I'd be too devastated to face." She went rigid but remained silent. I turned toward the gazebo. Piper had frozen completely. Her hands clutched the bouquet so tightly the white roses were crushed, their petals falling like snow. Her eyes were wide with terror, like she was fighting back screams. I almost pitied her. Connor looked like someone had kicked him in the chest and he was still trying to pretend it didn't hurt. I continued walking, taking slow, deliberate steps down the aisle I should have walked 3 days from now in my grandmother's dress to stand beside the man who was now acting like he'd never seen me before. The whispers grew louder. People were standing now. Phone cameras appeared. This was no longer a private humiliation. It was a public reckoning. And I was about to burn their perfect facade to the ground. Vivian moved to intercept me again, but I fixed her with a look so cold it froze her in place. "You wanted a flawless day," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Let's give them a story they'll never forget." She wavered. I stepped into the front row, close enough to touch the gazebo steps. I scanned the crowd slowly. Familiar faces stared back, hospital colleagues, neighbors, family friends, people who'd congratulated me and Connor, people who'd sent engagement gifts. Not one of them had questioned why I wasn't the bride. The betrayal cut deeper with each recognition. I spotted Brooke in the third row, my work colleague. Her face revealed everything. She knew. Her lips quivered, tears threatening to spill, her entire body language screaming guilt and shame. I said nothing to her. Not yet. My attention returned to Connor. He finally stepped forward. "Madison," he began, his voice artificially calm, like this was just some awkward misunderstanding. "Let's not do this here." "Here?" I repeated, tilting my head. "You mean the wedding you planned in secret with my sorority sister? Using my parents' venue, my dress design, and my guest list?" A collective gasp swept through the garden. Piper looked ready to faint. "We didn't mean," she stammered, her voice breaking. I cut her off. "You didn't mean what, Piper? Didn't mean to seduce my fiancé? Didn't mean to steal my wedding? Didn't mean to lie to my face while helping me plan the ceremony you intended to hijack?" More gasps. Phone cameras were recording now, faces grim with fascination. Connor swallowed hard. "This isn't the right time," he said weakly. I faced him completely. "No? Because you thought the right time was yesterday when you had your mother call my hospital to cancel everything?" His eyes flickered with panic. I raised my voice so everyone could hear. "You thought I'd disappear quietly, that I'd cry and hide and let you rewrite our entire history. You severely underestimated me, Connor." He flinched visibly. I pulled out my phone. "What are you?" Vivian started, moving closer. "Playing back reality," I said simply. I tapped the screen. Vivian's voice filled the garden. "We've changed the venue reservation. Connor knows what's right for the family. Don't create drama. Just accept this." The crowd gasped again, but I wasn't finished. I played another recording. Connor's voice, clear and damning. "Madison's just not Blake material, Mom. Piper understands what being a proper wife means." The garden erupted. Someone dropped their champagne glass. Piper stepped backward, staring at Connor like he'd struck her. Vivian's jaw clenched so tightly I thought her teeth might crack. I let the chaos settle before speaking again. Then I climbed the gazebo steps and stood directly beside them. "Still want him?" I asked Piper quietly, my voice cutting through the noise like a blade. She remained silent. I turned to Connor. "How long?" I demanded. He blinked stupidly. I moved closer. "How long have you been planning this betrayal?" He couldn't answer. Piper found her voice. It just happened naturally." I laughed, sharp and bitter. "You don't naturally steal someone's wedding dress and venue. You don't accidentally orchestrate a complete betrayal." Vivian intervened, her voice strained. "Stop this embarrassment. You're humiliating yourself." I looked at her with lethal calm. "You orchestrated this whole thing, didn't you?" She didn't deny it. I smiled coldly. "You know what, Vivian?" I said, leaning closer. I was prepared to be gracious, to marry your son, to ignore your constant criticism. But now. I paused, watching fear creep into her eyes. Now I'm going to dismantle everything you've built. She blinked, finally looking uncertain. Connor tried to salvage the situation. It's over now. Let's just move forward. I pulled out a folded document. Actually, let's discuss what happens next. I unfolded it deliberately. This is the venue contract you co-signed, Connor. The one requiring mutual agreement for any changes or full financial responsibility if breached unilaterally. His face went white. Vivian stiffened. $18,000, I announced to the crowd. Full amount owed immediately. You're bluffing, Vivian snapped. I handed the contract to Carmen, my sister, who happened to be a family law attorney. Signed, witnessed, legally binding. I addressed the entire gathering. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for witnessing the Blake family's true character. I suggest collecting your gifts before I file charges for fraud and emotional damages. Chaos erupted. Voices rose, chairs scattered. Vivian tried to speak, but I raised my hand for silence. No more lies, no more manipulation. You thought I'd vanish quietly. Instead, I'm here. You tried to erase me, but you've made me unforgettable. I stepped down from the gazebo, composed and resolute. Connor looked shattered. Piper was already fleeing toward the parking lot. Vivian stood motionless, her social empire crumbling around her. I walked down that aisle one final time. Not as a bride, but as a woman reclaiming her power. This ceremony wasn't mine, but the reckoning that followed would be. When I stepped out of Heritage Garden, the afternoon sun was harsh and unforgiving. For a moment, the brightness felt like an assault. The world had continued spinning while mine had completely derailed. Guests scattered behind me, voices buzzing like disturbed bees. Some were arguing, others whispering, many were recording everything on their phones. The air was thick with shock, gossip, and pure chaos. But I felt nothing. No trembling, no tears. Just emptiness. The kind of hollow silence that comes when something inside you shatters so completely there's no sound left to make. I walked steadily to my car, slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and drove away. No destination, no plan. Just asphalt stretching ahead and the cold rage that pulsed through my veins like electricity. They had stolen everything, my wedding, my dignity, my closest friend, my fiancé, my trust in everyone I'd loved. But they hadn't stolen me. They hadn't taken my mind, my determination, my ability to fight back. What they didn't realize was that I'd spent the last 7 years working in hospital administration, navigating complex bureaucracies, managing crises, understanding systems, regulations, and human psychology. I knew how to dismantle people methodically. And now I had a single target, the Blake family. I pulled into a roadside diner parking lot, turned off the engine, and sat gripping the steering wheel. The rage hadn't faded. No more emotional reactions. Time to strategize. I called Dylan. He answered after 2 rings, sounding tired. Madison, what's up? I need you, I said simply. A pause, then where are you? 15 minutes outside town. I'll send you the location. Come alone. Dylan Torres wasn't just any friend. He was the guy who'd helped me through my parents' death 5 years ago, the one who'd sat with me in hospital waiting rooms and made sure I ate actual meals. He'd become an immigration lawyer, precise, methodical, ruthlessly effective. He didn't waste time with questions. He just showed up. I was leaning against my car with a cold coffee when he arrived. His sedan pulled up beside mine and he got out, dress shirt wrinkled, sleeves rolled up, eyes sharp despite his exhaustion. I'm assuming your wedding preparations hit some complications, he said carefully. I gave him a look that could have frozen water. He held up his hands. Poor timing for humor. I straightened. I need you to help me destroy them. Dylan blinked. Not from anger, I clarified. From necessity. You need to hear everything before you decide if this is revenge or justice. So I told him the complete story. From Vivian's call to the venue theft to the hijacked ceremony. I showed him the recordings, the venue contract Connor had co-signed, the guest list, the payment receipts, the entire timeline. I told him about Piper and Brooke. I laid out every detail, not for sympathy, but for strategic planning. Dylan listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned against his car and let out a long breath. "You weren't just betrayed," he said. "You were systematically erased. This was calculated. This wasn't a relationship ending, it was a targeted demolition." He crossed his arms. "Legal first. You mentioned Connor co-signed the venue contract? 2 months ago. His mother insisted, said it showed family commitment. I have the original. And you kept copies?" I reached into my purse and pulled out the folder. Dylan scanned it quickly. "Clause 12, I said. Any unilateral changes require written consent from both parties or full financial responsibility falls to the party making unauthorized modifications." Dylan whistled softly. "This is ironclad." "My idea," I said calmly. Connor barely read it. Vivian was too confident to bother with details. Dylan's expression turned predatory. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "Then we have grounds. But that's just the beginning. You want this public?" "Not yet. Not messy. Not until I control every angle." He nodded. "Reputation management, community pressure, systemic consequences." "I want it clean," I said. "No screaming headlines or social media wars. I want their standing to rot from the inside out. Permanent, irreversible." Dylan's eyes lit up with professional interest. "I want it devastating." That's how our campaign began. We met every evening for the following week. We were quiet, discreet. I deleted my online accounts, blocked Connor's number, ignored Brooke's guilt-ridden messages, and let Piper sit in her own shame. The Blake family assumed they'd won. That overconfidence would be their downfall. We began by gathering intelligence. Dylan reached out to former patients' families who dealt with the hospital board that Vivian influenced. There were many who had grievances, families who'd been dismissed, staff who'd been silenced, policies that had been changed to benefit the Blakes' interests. Some had kept documentation, emails, meeting minutes, recorded conversations. We collected everything systematically. Meanwhile, I traced their community connections. Vivian sat on multiple charity boards. Connor had loan applications pending at competing banks. Piper had just signed with a local wellness center thanks to her newfound respectable status. Unfortunately for her, the contracts hadn't been finalized yet. Unfortunately for all of them, I knew exactly when and where to apply pressure. But I wasn't rushing. Before implementing anything, I needed absolute confirmation that this wasn't just betrayal, but deliberate character destruction. For that, I needed insider testimony. So I contacted Brooke. Not through text or email. A direct phone call. She picked up immediately. "Madison," she gasped. "Please, I can explain." "Not yet," I interrupted. "If you want any chance at redemption, meet me. Just us." She hesitated. "Are you going to destroy me?" "No," I said. "But I might never forgive you unless you tell me everything." She agreed. We met at a coffee shop across town. Just 2 women and the truth between them. She looked exhausted, haunted. Dark circles under her eyes, hands shaking slightly as she sat down. "You knew," I said immediately. Her eyes filled with tears. "Yes." "How long?" 3 weeks, she whispered. Vivian cornered me in the hospital break room. She said Connor was having doubts, that Piper was a better match for the family. I stared at her steadily. "And you said nothing to me?" "She threatened my job," Brooke said, voice breaking. "She's on the hospital board. She said one word from her could end my career. I have a mortgage, student loans. I couldn't risk everything." I breathed slowly. "Did you know about the venue switch beforehand?" Brooke shook her head. "No." That shocked me too. Did you help them access my personal items? No. That was Piper, I think. I leaned back. Connor? Was he involved from the beginning? Not initially. But when Vivian presented it as the right choice, he went along with it. He said it was easier than dealing with a public breakup. I laughed without humor. I'm sorry, Madison, Brooke whispered. I was a coward. You deserved loyalty. I stood. You're right. I left her sitting there alone. That evening, Dylan and I finalized our first move. The legal offensive. We drafted a formal demand letter to Connor and Vivian, requiring immediate compensation under the venue contract, itemizing damages, and including a preliminary injunction for intentional infliction of emotional distress, breach of contract, and fraudulent misrepresentation. The Blake family received it without response. No acknowledgement, no counteroffer. That silence told me everything. They were panicking. But I was just getting started. This wasn't revenge. This was preparation. The quiet before the hurricane. The thing about stories is who tells them matters more than what actually happened. I'd learned that managing hospital crises for 7 years. Truth alone never wins. It needs careful packaging, precise timing, and strategic silence to let opponents destroy themselves. The Blake family had orchestrated a betrayal so public, so humiliating, they expected shame to silence me. What they didn't expect was that I knew how to weaponize community narratives. The moment our legal notice went out, I began preparing the real battlefield. Not the courtroom, Dylan had that covered. I was preparing the court of public opinion. I created a command center in my living room. Medical charts, laptop screens, voice recordings, timeline documents. No assistant, no team. Just me, exhausted at 2 a.m., methodically dismantling their reputation piece by piece. I planned to go viral quietly. The kind of quiet that explodes before anyone knows the source. I started with the stolen bride. That was my anonymous identity, a woman whose wedding was hijacked, who discovered her life erased by her fiancé, her friend, and his controlling family. I created a Reddit account and shared the story in installments. Each post detailed, honest, anonymous. No names, just raw emotion. Betrayal, shock, the phone call, the venue theft, the replacement ceremony. I didn't need to exaggerate. The truth was devastating enough. Within hours, it gained traction. By morning, the post had reached the front page. Hashtags appeared: stolen Britatrend, wedding theft, bride replacement crimes. People were outraged, fascinated, obsessed. TikTok users began narrating the story. Twitter reposted it with captions like, "This is every woman's nightmare." Someone created a dramatic reenactment using voice actors. It spread rapidly. But I remained silent. No posts from my real accounts. Not even anonymous interactions. Because the perfect trap requires them to feel secure. By day 3, major wedding blogs had picked up the story. Then local news outlets. A journalist contacted the anonymous account, requesting an interview with the stolen bride. I provided more details. Strategically, carefully. One crucial detail: the replacement bride wore the original bride's custom dress. That ignited fury. Dozens of people online began analyzing recent wedding photos from our area, trying to identify the participants. Someone eventually found Piper's Instagram. Her latest post, dated the day after my hijacked wedding, showed her in my dress. Same beadwork, same train design. Even the custom alterations were visible. The comment section erupted. Wait, is this the stolen dress? Isn't this Madison Stone's custom design? Didn't she order this from Bella's bridal 6 months ago? The story had faces. People began tagging me, messaging me directly. My name was trending locally. A video compilation appeared, clips from Connor and my engagement photos, with Piper visible in several background shots. The internet began investigating. Vivian Blake released a statement 3 days later. Polished, condescending. She called the online speculation malicious gossip designed to harm a private family decision. Huge mistake. A viral tweet labeled her the ultimate mother-in-law villain. That post alone generated hundreds of thousands of likes. Then came the message leak. No one knew the source, but somehow Vivian's texts to Connor appeared online. In them, she wrote, "Madison isn't Blake caliber. Too independent, too questioning. Piper will be compliant." That phrase spread like wildfire. Compliant. As if Connor needed a wife who followed orders, not an equal partner. The next day, the wellness center that had hired Piper released a statement about reviewing their staffing decisions. Her contract was terminated within 24 hours. I felt no sympathy. Connor disappeared from social media, but the internet didn't forget. Former high school classmates began sharing stories about Connor's history of letting others do his work, about Vivian's reputation for buying influence, about Piper's pattern of pursuing taken men. A pattern emerged. Not just betrayal, but systematic entitlement. Control, manipulation, inherited privilege. Not love. Dylan kept updating me on legal developments. The Blakes hadn't responded to our filing. Probably stalling. Probably hoping the attention would fade. It intensified instead. Because I wasn't finished. The next move was the recording. I'd debated this extensively. It was personal, revealing. But necessary. I had a voice memo from 3 weeks before the wedding, Connor and me discussing our future on my porch. In it, he said, "Mom's difficult, but she'll respect you once she sees your strength. That's what I love about you. You never compromise who you are." The same man who later called me inappropriate for the family. I posted it anonymously with the caption, "This was 3 weeks before he replaced me." The contrast was devastating. People were furious. That's when local influencers got involved. Several had worked with the hospital on community health campaigns. They knew my professional reputation, and once they understood what had happened, they supported me publicly. One posted, "I've collaborated with Madison Stone. She's competent, compassionate, and no one deserves this betrayal." This isn't social media drama, it's real-life trauma. Another shared the recording saying, "This is why women have trust issues. This kind of betrayal doesn't just wound, it erases you." Vivian attempted damage control. She gave an interview. A disastrous, tone-deaf interview. She wore expensive jewelry and a navy suit, sat rigidly across from a local news anchor, and tried to portray me as unstable, possessive, and unsuitable for their family. It backfired spectacularly. Clips of her saying, "Sometimes people simply aren't family material," went viral with sarcastic commentary. Someone edited her interview alongside footage of Piper looking terrified at the altar. The internet labeled it Blake Family Cringe Compilation. Vivian had no idea how to combat an invisible army of smartphones and social media creators. Connor finally posted something. A blank screen with one line, "I never meant to cause pain." He disabled comments immediately. Dylan called that evening, barely containing his amusement. "They're self-destructing. They're panicking," I corrected. "Which means we're winning." He chuckled, ready for the next phase? "Not yet. Not obvious. Just one more strategic whisper." So I whispered carefully. I contacted the hospital board, where Vivian held significant influence through her family's donations and social connections. I sent an anonymous report. Attached were the leaked messages and a comprehensive analysis of the public relations disaster, the terminated contracts, the pending legal action. I knew someone on that board, Dr. Patricia Chen. We'd worked together on patient advocacy initiatives. I remembered she'd once mentioned Vivian's inappropriate attempts to influence medical decisions through financial pressure. The next morning, the board issued a statement, "Mrs. Vivian Blake will be stepping back from all advisory roles pending a comprehensive review of board ethics policies." The local headline read, "Prominent family matriarch loses hospital influence." I watched it all from my kitchen window, drinking coffee like a strategist who hadn't even deployed her main forces yet. This wasn't just a reputation war. This was systematic, calculated dismantling. And I was nowhere near finished. The county courthouse was nothing impressive. Just a plain brick building with chipped paint and a squeaky flagpole. But inside that unremarkable structure, the Blake family was about to face consequences. Dylan and I arrived early. I wore navy blue, not for sympathy, but for authority. Sharp blazer, low heels, hair pulled back severely. My makeup was minimal, professional, intimidating. Dylan reviewed our file one final time, sorting documents like a surgeon preparing for critical operation. "They're still avoiding us," he said. "No counter-filing. They might try to settle last minute." "They won't," I replied. "They still think they can manipulate this," Dylan smiled grimly. We entered as the clerk called the session to order. This wasn't a full trial, just a hearing for our motion to compel payment under the venue contract Connor had co-signed. But because of the Blake family's prominence, and the social media storm that had raged for 2 weeks, the gallery was crowded. Local reporters, legal interns, college students taking notes while discreetly posting updates. Even a lifestyle blogger sat in the back, eyes gleaming like she was witnessing compelling drama. Vivian arrived first, accompanied by 2 lawyers and dressed like she was attending a funeral. Black designer suit, dark sunglasses, trembling hands as she passed documents to her attorney. It might have seemed authentic if she hadn't posed for photographers outside moments earlier. Connor followed separately. His face was gaunt, exhausted. He avoided eye contact with everyone. Just slumped beside Vivian, staring downward, as if hiding might erase his participation. I refused to acknowledge him. When the judge entered, everyone rose. Our case was straightforward. Connor had co-signed a contract requiring mutual consent for venue changes or full financial responsibility for unauthorized modifications. Not only had the venue been changed without my consent, it had been used for an identical ceremony with a different bride using my decorations and guest list. Dylan presented it methodically. Then he played the recordings. The judge, a middle-aged woman with steel-gray hair, listened without reaction as Connor's voice filled the courtroom. "Madison's just not Blake material. Piper understands what being a proper wife means." Then Vivian's, "We've changed the venue reservation. Don't create drama. Just accept this." The silence afterward was deafening. The judge looked directly at Vivian. "Did you send that message?" Vivian's lawyer objected on relevance grounds. The judge overruled immediately. Vivian straightened and replied, "Yes, but it was a private family decision, not contractual." The judge responded sharply, particularly not when the message demonstrates deliberate breach of a binding agreement. Dylan submitted printed invoices, payment confirmations, and vendor correspondence, all dated before the unauthorized change. Then came decisive evidence, a sworn affidavit from Brooke, filed that morning, admitting Vivian had pressured her not to warn me about the ceremony replacement. My former colleague had finally broken. The judge examined the evidence with clinical detachment. Then she addressed Connor directly. "Do you have anything to say, Mr. Blake?" He glanced up briefly. Surprisingly, he stood and spoke. "I didn't intend for it to happen this way," he said quietly. "I felt pressured. I panicked. My mother suggested." The judge raised her hand. "Did you voluntarily co-sign the contract?" "Yes." "Did you authorize venue changes without Ms. Stone's written consent?" "Yes." "Did you proceed with an identical ceremony using the same venue with a different bride?" "Yes." She closed the file. "Then your intentions are legally irrelevant." Then came her ruling. Under the contract terms and given clear evidence of deliberate breach, Mr. Blake is ordered to pay Ms. Stone the full amount of $18,400 in damages. Additional penalties for emotional distress will be considered in subsequent proceedings. I didn't smile. I simply nodded once. Dylan leaned toward me. "That's not just victory. That's public vindication." Vivian looked like she'd been physically struck. Her face contorted with rage, jaw clenched until her temples pulsed. Her eyes locked on mine with pure hatred. She actually stood in the courtroom and spoke directly to me. "You think you've destroyed us?" I met her gaze calmly. "No. I know I've survived. There's a significant difference. She stepped forward before the bailiff intervened. I will rebuild everything you've torn down. I stared at her with complete composure. I didn't tear anything down, I said. You did that yourselves. I just provided illumination. Connor didn't look at me as he left. But Piper did. She was waiting outside when I emerged. Her hair was disheveled, eyes red-rimmed. I didn't realize it would end like this, she said, voice breaking. I stopped walking. What did you expect? I asked. A fairy tale ending built on betrayal? You chose this. I was told things would be different. I don't care what you were told. She flinched. I never meant to hurt you, she whispered. You meant to benefit yourself. The hurt was collateral damage, I said. Piper stepped backward, and I continued past her. Outside, reporters surrounded us. I made no statements. Dylan navigated us through the crowd, blocking cameras and shouted questions. We reached the car and closed the doors. Then Dylan turned to me. Ready for the final phase? I nodded. Because the legal victory was finished, but the real resolution hadn't arrived yet. That part would be personal. And it would come silently, like winter settling over a landscape. They had dismantled my life with calculated cruelty. But I had rebuilt mine with unbreakable resolve. It didn't happen overnight. Rebuilding never does. In the days after the courthouse ruling, the noise faded into a different kind of silence. Not the suffocating silence of betrayal or the electric silence of rage. This was the silence of freedom. The kind that gives you space to breathe again. I didn't make any public statements. I didn't need to. The community had already spoken for me. After the verdict, the Blake family's influence crumbled. Vivian's hospital board position was revoked within a week. Connor's loan applications were quietly denied at multiple banks. Piper's wellness center contract was terminated. Piper disappeared from social media entirely. Someone said they saw her at a retreat in Colorado. I didn't care enough to verify. Brooke transferred to another hospital. We never spoke again. Not because I hated her, but because there was nothing left to say. Some betrayals don't scream. They just leave echoes you don't want to hear anymore. And me? I stayed and thrived. I kept my house, made it truly mine. Repainted every room, planted a garden, donated the unused wedding gifts. I took a position as Director of Patient Advocacy at the Regional Medical Center. Helping families navigate healthcare crises and medical ethics disputes. One of my cases involved a family whose insurance had been wrongfully denied. After we won their appeal, the daughter said, "You don't back down. Like you've fought bigger battles." I just smiled. And I'd won. 6 months later, I received a letter. Handwritten, no return address. Inside, a note, "You were right about everything." I wanted something that wasn't mine because I didn't believe I could build anything myself. "I'm sorry." It wasn't signed, but I knew it was from Piper. I didn't respond. I burned it in my fireplace and watched the flames consume her apology. I never heard from Connor again, except once. A brief email. Subject, "Can we talk?" I read it, deleted it, blocked the address, and never looked back. Because I never needed closure. Not from him, not from any of them. They had taken pieces of my past, but I had already reclaimed my future. A year later, I stood before a packed auditorium, dressed in white again. Not a wedding dress, but a crisp professional suit. The kind of white that commands attention without asking permission. I was speaking at a healthcare ethics conference. Topic: advocacy in the face of institutional pressure. I looked out at the faces, doctors, nurses, administrators, advocates. And I told them my story. Not with names, but with truth. I spoke of losing everything you thought defined you and discovering who you really were beneath it all. I spoke of betrayal and how it's never about the moment they break you, but what you build afterward. The applause started quietly. Then it grew. Standing, sustained, powerful. Afterward, a young medical student approached me. I read about your case online, she said. But seeing you here now, you're proof we can survive anything and come back stronger. I put a hand on her shoulder. You already are strong, I said. You just haven't had to prove it yet. And I walked away, knowing that the life I had now wasn't new. It was the one that had always been mine, waiting beneath layers of compromise and fear. But I rose. I chose myself. And that was the most powerful victory of all. Just success, peace, and the profound happiness that comes when no one else owns your story. Now, when people ask about the wedding that never happened, I just smile. Not because it didn't hurt. Not because I've forgotten. But because I look at the life I've built and realize they didn't destroy me. They freed me. Madison Stone's story is one of those rare narratives that doesn't just deliver justice, it reflects back who we are when everything is stripped away. At first glance, it may appear to be a story of revenge, but it's so much more. It's a masterclass in emotional survival. It's about finding power in powerlessness and choosing dignity in the face of humiliation. The first lesson is that betrayal is never the end of the story. It's the beginning of clarity. When Madison received that devastating phone call at the hospital, it wasn't just a logistical nightmare. It was an existential ambush. But instead of collapsing, she saw through the illusion. The people she trusted had been betraying her for weeks. Once the illusion shattered, she chose observation over pity. What you thought was love might have been dependence. What you called friendship might have been proximity. Betrayal isn't just a wound, it's a revelation. Another powerful lesson is that silence can be stronger than spectacle. Madison never screamed or begged. Instead, she collected herself, processed, and planned. Her silence was surgical, focused, dangerous in the best way. She taught us that emotional control isn't about suppression, it's about direction. Sometimes the most powerful response is to rebuild in plain sight. The story also reminds us that identity must never be outsourced. Madison's world had been built around an identity others approved of. But when that was stripped away, she discovered the truth. She wasn't just a bride-to-be. She was a strategist, a leader, a woman capable of rising from ruins. Then there's the lesson about revenge as reclamation. Madison didn't seek traditional vengeance. What she did was claim back what was stolen, her voice, her story, her worth. True revenge isn't about inflicting pain. It's about removing power from those who thought they could hurt you without consequences. Perhaps the most meaningful lesson comes in the aftermath. Madison didn't let revenge define her. She rose above it. She built a new life as a testament. She chose peace because peace is the ultimate power move. Madison's success wasn't in winning the case or social media vindication. It was in showing up for herself after the dust settled. She didn't become a cautionary tale. She became a blueprint. What do we take from Madison's journey? You are allowed to collapse, but not forever. You are allowed to rage, but not rot in it. You are allowed to lose everything and still rise. Your power isn't in how perfectly you love. It's in how gracefully you recover when love fails you. Your worth isn't in the ring they never gave you. It's in the empire you build without it. The best revenge isn't making them hurt. It's making sure they never get to be part of the life you were always meant to live.